All right, well, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome everybody to this evening's kōrero on external providers and teaching quality physical education. Just to set the scene, PENZ is an incorporated society for people interested in promoting quality physical education and actively promotes and develops physical education within New Zealand for teachers and students. As such, PENZ believes that it's important to position ourselves as advocates of physical education experiences that are fun, learning and student-centred, and are inclusive of all ākonga and students. This webinar aims to reinforce to teachers the significance of PE program planning and design that has strong curriculum links and which celebrates teachers and students' interests while meeting the needs of ākonga and students. I'd also like to acknowledge that on the webinar tonight, there are a number of RSTs, and I imagine that some of the ideas from Maureen or perhaps discussions within the chat could be raised as further conversation topics with schools that you're working with. Throughout this webinar, there will be the opportunity to write feedback or questions throughout through the chat function, and anything that can't be answered this evening will be followed up by PENZ. Tanya is also going to pop in a very short poll to kick things off, which we will reflect on at the end of the webinar. PENZ's position statement on external providers and teaching quality physical education has been posted on Facebook and is also available under the advocacy tab on our website. But in summary, in case you haven't read the document but are interested in the topic, Physical Education New Zealand believes that ākonga or students need quality physical education experiences to improve their lifelong learning, and that teachers can provide quality physical education within a supportive learning environment. External providers can help deliver suitable activities and provide expertise in some areas of physical education, but teachers will have the best understanding of the needs of their own ākonga, also the curriculum requirements, as well as good teaching practices. With me this evening is Dr. Maureen Legg, education consultant, teacher and researcher. Maureen has crafted the document that articulates PENZ's position on external providers and teaching quality physical education. It's great to have Maureen with me here this evening to offer her insights into this topic. But before I hand over to Maureen, if possible, we will now be able to see the poll. I'm just thinking telepathically with Tanya. Look at that, it works. If you could read those two questions and respond for us, please. If possible, and I appreciate we've got RST reps, could we have teacher response to this? And if you're wanting to have comments around this acknowledged, we can do so in the chat at any point. But ideally, teacher responses at this stage would give us the most informative response. So we've got just under 10 responses so far. We might wait for another 20 seconds or so. Okay, I'm closing that now. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Maureen and welcome her to this discussion. So I will step out now. Maureen, the virtual floor is yours.
Kia ora, Heather, and kia ora tātou. Thank you for attending this webinar. I'm assuming that you've come from a variety of aspects related to the use of external providers and with a particular interest in physical education. And as a long-time physical educator, I have seen external providers rise up or increase in the amount of availability over the past at least 20 odd years. What I want to do tonight is just to reiterate the key points from the position paper and perhaps throw in some more direct commentary for you to consider. So let's just begin at the beginning. First of all, I think it's really important that everyone recognises that the teachers are the leaders in the schools. So from this perspective, they need to be in control of designing the best physical education program for their class. We know that research shows that a teacher is better placed to lead physical education because of their professionalism. They have a thorough knowledge of their learners, context, and pedagogy. This means they know the students in their class, they can manage the organisation of their students, for example, a better matchup of students in pairs, small groups, and teams. When planning physical education, they can also draw on other aspects of education that are going on at any time in their school to make links to other curriculum activities, for example, in art, social studies, science. Teachers have studied pedagogy and they know how to make learning meaningful. And even when teachers describe themselves as not being sporty, teacher-led physical education is preferable. However, research has also shown that many primary school teachers in New Zealand lack confidence and competence when it comes to physical education. And this may be due to a variety of reasons. Teacher education during my time as a teacher educator has certainly reduced the amount of learning associated with teaching physical education in primary schools. That is a significant contributor to how teachers must now feel, or some teachers. There's also been a reduction in advisory services and the like. So this often means teachers will turn to external providers for support. This is understandable and it can work well, but any partnership between a school and providers must be set up with the aim of delivering quality physical education. So to best meet the needs of the children involved, there's a range of critical questions or considerations to establish between the school and the external provider. Schools intending to use or considering using external providers need to ask themselves, what do you know about the external provider? What is their reputation? You need to be discerning about in whose best interest the external provider is being included. It is also important to manage legal and safety requirements, what roles people will take, responsibility of care, curriculum implementation, program delivery, and to encourage the construction of a memorandum of understanding between all entities. This may seem complicated, but in the event of incidents or the situation being problematic, referring back to a memorandum of understanding could stand you in good stead. The educative decision to outsource aspects of programs needs to be based on design rather than response to an offer from a well-meaning but not necessarily appropriate outside provider. So people, principals and teachers who decide to use external providers in the delivery of health and physical education need to ask the question, what are we educating for? Look for the educational component in what is being offered by the external provider. Where is the teaching and learning and the curriculum links? And there is also importance of context. 3 questions that are written in the statement that I would just like you to reflect on now. Question 1, Where do the activities offered by the external providers fit with our school's physical education program? How will this external provider and add quality experiences, knowledge and understanding to our tamariki and the physical education program? Will the external provider help us meet our teaching goals for physical education, or is their involvement unnecessary? A balanced physical education program will require close reading of the Health and Physical Education New Zealand curriculum alongside the overall New Zealand curriculum, and must draw on all underlying concepts, the key areas of learning and the 4 strands, not to mention key competencies, essential skills, and various topics within physical education. My concern is, and I don't wish to offend anyone in this statement, is that in my observation, most external providers come to schools with an offering of sports-orientated activities. That's great, but physical education is so much more than sport. And if you need to find out more about what could be done in your school program in terms of physical activities, I would recommend that you go to the recently published online resources for primary school teachers, and in book 2 of that resource, there's a great list of suggestions for topics within your physical education program other than sports, although sports and games are definitely a part of being a physically educated person. Here's some things to think about. If you're locked into an external provider because it's always been done that way, why don't you look to how you could make it a better fit? This means that you would need to talk with the provider and plan together. And a well-discussed debrief after the event could help for future planning. Perhaps external providers could be better used for professional development of the teachers. Rather than coming to the school to work with the children, they could be in the school to work with teachers after school, before school, on a special teacher-only day. The external provider is not the teacher, so it's really important that the teacher is always present when the external provider is working with the students. This means you need to have some backup plan if, in the case of an injury, a student has to be taken away from the activity. The teacher can't go with that student. Someone else will need to. When sports or external providers offer to participate in your school program, you might want to say yes, but not as part of physical education, and offer other alternative times, before school, after school, on a special activities day. One of the concerns about external providers from my perspective is that there is often a one-size-fits-all, and that's not a good program model. You have to ask yourself, are they trying to make money? Are they trying to meet their KPIs and their own needs for success? And that's being critical and brutal, but that could be the case. I'm not suggesting it is, but you do need to question the external provider's intent. I'd just like to suggest that, or return to my opening comment. I believe, and I know that I'm supported by my PENS colleagues, that the teacher is the best person to lead physical education. How that is done to help improve physical education is beyond my little effort at the moment, but I do know there are opportunities for more professional development for those of you who are watching and listening now. So for the time being, I've said what I can say, and I'd like to suggest to Heather, do you have anything more to add, or perhaps Tania?
Thank you very much, Maureen. Listening to you talk, it's very clear that you're not wanting to offend people who offer support, who come well intended into our primary school space, and have a genuine, I guess, a genuine desire to support the development, particularly of movement skills and connections with young people's ability to transition into sport. I think what you're also making equally clear is that the preference for the delivery, for the development and the thinking around meeting the potential lack of confidence maybe or competence in this area on behalf of the generalist generalist primary school teacher is to consider it through a sustainability lens. So I wanted to put this out to people here, and if you'd like to use the chat, it would be great to hear your ideas. The difference for me is really significant, but what about for you? What do you feel in terms of a provider coming in and filling a need at that moment versus creating a sustainable means of developing physical education in that primary school when that provider is not around? So feel free to write in the chat. It'd be great to see some ideas coming through there. And taking into account that, within primary, there is physical activity, play and physical education all in that Venn diagram. And at times there's some overlapping, just like what Maureen said about sport, having its place, but that physical education is a lot more than any of those small pieces of the whole. Yeah, so sustainability versus that help offered in those potentially one-off sessions or sessions that run over a few weeks, once a week. How do we feel? What's the feel out there?
At the risk of no one talking at the moment or making a comment, I'll just add to the conversation, and again, it's from my observations. Outdoor education is an area that is often outsourced, and sometimes I would be, a lot of times I would question that because of the nature of the outdoor education that sometimes primary school teachers take their students on. And in my view, it is not necessary to bus your classes halfway down the North Island or into the centre of the South Island when the kind of outdoor education that's suitable for primary school children can more often than not be done locally, particularly if you talk about education outside the classroom, which has a much broader reach. And it's not about more of the more adult activities that I often see utilised. So that's a consideration. And a colleague of mine has done some research on that, where she actually found that teachers in a rural area were really concerned that their school literally did that, bus children away from the area when right on their front doorstep and their back doorstep was a huge environment to which they could make that education more meaningful. That's just something to think about. And that's the nature of programming, particularly for outdoor education.
Maureen, do you have the chat there in front of you? Are you wanting to go with the questions and the discussions? I'm happy to help and support there. I know that while Maureen's having a chance to read what people have taken the time to write there.
No, I can't actually see that.
Okay.
Oh, chat 4, hang on.
Tanya, you have a screenshot of the resources that Maureen was talking about. If you want to pop those in there. So as part of this idea around sustainability, these resources will be on offer and available to all primary teachers, whereby they can themselves engage in some learning around what contexts they would like to use and how that might be applied in their kura. So these are, here we go, books written as resources, 2 parts, understanding the health and physical education curriculum in book 1. And you can see there what that book covers. Book 2 takes that knowledge, the core conceptual ideas, and connects with activities and contexts that can be used that are student-centred and are, again, focused around ensuring quality physical education. So supporting teachers in their lesson planning and also giving them the confidence to know what they're able to do if they are uncertain and need just a point to start from. Because I liked when you said, Maureen, around that the design is at the heart of what's going on, that then leads to connections with external providers rather than greeting an external provider. I think the studies showed that principals around New Zealand are ranging, their feedback is that they are receiving between 100 and 200 phone calls a year from external providers across various different curriculum areas and with different hats. But that's the sort of number of people that are out there and wanting to have a little piece of that action that's going on in our kura. And particularly, we're talking about primary here. So that hopefully answers the person who asked in the chat, are we talking primary? Well, this case, the external provider's position statement was focused around primary.
Secondary does have a slightly different take on external providers, I think, because they're calling in for a kind of maybe a level of expertise that at this stage or on this conversation we hadn't really thought was a need to consider, but it may be something for a later event. I think just hearing Heather say about the 200 calls from providers who are offering to schools, I think that's a little bit of a sad indictment of how people possibly view education and think that teachers aren't doing the job that they actually can do, and they're doing it under very difficult situations and more challenging than what someone can imagine, I think, without actually being in education. There's a question here about someone Helen, who was is an outside provider, and at the end of it, she suggests, would it be more of a management call about what goes into a program? And from the research that was done in teaching physical education in primary schools and outdoor education, most definitely management have a lot to answer for in many ways, because more often than not, from the research I've seen, they carry some embedded practices from the past that make it difficult for more contemporary approaches to physical education and outdoor education.
A question here too, or a situation where a principal's suggestion, that's my noisy cat who's decided to join us, the principal has been the one to push for involvement from an external provider. In particular, in this case, it was karate. A trained PE teacher would need to have that skill themselves and the ability to deliver. I think that, Maureen, you touched on the idea that we could be looking at aspects of the school day where these sorts of activities could be included. I know over the years we've had things that have come in and out of what seems to be either, or challenged to be either a curriculum-based activity or sitting outside of that, and have been treated accordingly, having the discussion being held within the school as to what they value and what they see as important. So example of karate might be that is a great idea. It could be that there's a need for that those students would value participating in that, but it may be that it's not seen as physical education, that could be a physical activity or a connect with that external provider at a point in time that is not a curriculum or part of the curriculum delivery of PE.
Maybe it's a label change too, karate. You could perhaps rephrase it as self-defense and easily bring that into a physical education program on a range of different levels.
There's also examples too, Maureen, I've seen where that type of activity-based session is run by the external provider who is able to bring in equipment. I know someone's talking about paddleboarding. I totally get that if you're going to be able to connect, especially if it's not too expensive, that's an exciting opportunity. But there's a lot of further opportunity available to talk about the in, through and about learning that goes with anything that we could attend, or connect with the curriculum. So, how do I feel in the moment that my body's moving? Is there, in particular, if there's a paddleboarding experience, do I feel joy? Is this being buoyant on top of the water something that I didn't have an experience? So that in learning is something you can reflect on, and you can pull that apart in class, and you can create discussions. You might be able to make collages that represent the ways that young people feel. You could do some socio-emotional skill development, which is your through learning. And you could look at maybe some ideas around where paddleboarding's come from. Why is this now such a new and exciting summer activity that in certain areas of New Zealand is really starting to thrive? So it's kind of bringing in that other learning that you may not be able to. Teachers, a hand on heart, might say I have the expertise to deliver that particular movement context at that moment, but ensuring that if we're calling it physical education, there is that educative value as well.
Definitely. I'm just browsing some of these chats, and there's some interesting comments here. Someone who works for the council to support local primary schools. Now, that's an interesting thing in itself. Why the council is particularly supporting the primary school. I'd need to think about that, because I'm not sure that in many ways that's the council's role. However, I think, I think we need to have some kind of gatekeeping on education. Everybody's been to school and everybody thinks they know what it's like to be a teacher, but they don't. And this is where we do have to make some stands. And it's quite interesting reading the few people here who've said they are external providers. The feeling I get from them is that they're well aware of their externalness. And I think that's important.
Yeah, there's further examples here of utilising external providers for the Bike in Action. I've seen that here locally in Christchurch. It's very successful. More schools probably than not will link in with that type of activity. Again, that's an indication too of where something like learning to ride a bike has shifted into education, which it never was. It used to be something that a grandparent or a parent would teach their young person, and now these sorts of things are being housed within primary, and then some of them flow on to being skills that are being taught within secondary as well. So I think that we have to look at the reality of the changing world that we teach in, and that we have the role, as Maureen says, to be, overseeing and filtering what it is that we want in our local school environment and what's acceptable to us, and conversations that allow voices to be heard, so that we can, robust discussion can occur, and then we can really start to say whether or not we've achieved that goal of quality physical education. This is a paper on external providers and quality PE, but there's a number of things here. I'm not sure, it says it's Jay Edwards, but I believe it's some other name, the person who's in attendance, but there's still huge assumptions, especially at boys' schools and others, that PE is sport. I see that too in my role as subject advisor in many cases. Most of my department, you're saying here, are teachers that aren't actually physical education trained, but that's another subject altogether, another topic altogether. And I think that's sort of what we're able to say here tonight, is that there are things that we can talk around with regards to external providers and quality physical education, because that's what the position statement was written about. But that the bigger goal here is to consider, what is quality physical education? What does that look like in my school? Am I achieving that through the use of external providers? And if so, how do I make sure that my learners are, and their needs, the understanding I have as their teacher, is allowed or afforded to the people that are coming in to help support deliver that program? Because without that, it really is more of a push to somebody else, rather than taking ownership of a curriculum area that is a really important part, equally important, I would say, as any other part in the national curriculum or New Zealand NZC. That's the wider conversation. I think there's a lot to be said about where this piece fits with regards to quality physical education.
What we have to be really conscious of is how good we are as teachers if we put our minds to it, or if a small group of us get together and think, okay, we do want to give some bike education, but we don't actually need to invite a special bunch of people in. We can do it ourselves. Everyone's going to say to me, oh, there's a lot of time required. No more than if you were planning an English or reading and writing, especially if you link the reading and writing and the maths to your lessons or on cycle biking. So, thinking outside of the square is something that I think most teachers have to do to survive. And it's just perhaps transferring a little bit more of that into physical education. External providers don't know the kids that are in front of them. You do. We don't outsource maths. We don't outsource biology.
The things here, if I may, the question about good examples for PD delivered by external providers, that will differ in different regions around New Zealand, I'm sure. I think that there could be word of mouth where some people are talking about something that's made a significant difference for the growth and understanding of what quality, or how the PD can relate to or translate into quality physical education experiences for our konga once that group of people have come and gone. I think that the part where you question, especially if they don't have any formal background in PE, I think that's where the generalist teacher is able to use their pedagogical knowledge, their links with the curriculum, their understanding that the curriculum itself is far more than just the achievement objectives or strands, that there's the underlying concepts that provide the philosophical intent behind the HPE curriculum that allow the real deep learning to go on in that subject area that's just so different than any other curriculum subject area. That's the gift the teacher brings to this. And when the teacher is able to translate the learning from how that movement context might play out as quality physical education, I think it's a win-win. I think the problem, though, is if we start promoting it as the answer or the silver bullet, and that's where it becomes, I think we're in a little bit of danger. Also, this comment about the NIMSA research, teachers feeling confident to teach or be involved in the delivery of PE, but that there's actually in that report, the most recent report, not there is the significant outsourcing, mostly to RSTs, NSOs, local sports clubs, etc. But also what's interesting is that physical education reported or levels of achievement in that particular research document is quite low. I think there's some hidden issues in the reporting system. I understand the need to focus on curriculum level and expectation, but I think that it's heavily based around movement, skill, performance and development. And I also think it's really difficult to assess and gauge development and dispositions that come out of those underlying concepts. The socio-emotional skills are not considered as part of that research data. But when Darren writes here, it's not working for all children and there are inequalities or inequities, then I think, I would have to agree that we need to be really aware of what is working in our area. What can we do as part of any program that we deliver in our schools? We need to be critical, we need to reflect, and we need to ask the tough questions about what we do and why we do it. There's a couple of interesting things. Darren, you did write the critical thinking aspect of NEMSA report. I find that intriguing in itself. I think that we haven't really even talked about the role of developing critical thinkers within our subject area at all tonight, and yet it's accessible. And maybe that's a conversation for another day, because it's a fabulous opportunity that we have, being that we are a movement-based subject area. Anya, you have the results of the poll and are going to be able to bring those up for us. So of us present tonight who are teachers, the respondents who are 89% have utilised external providers. Interesting, isn't it? Because I wonder if some of us are aware of this and are concerned, or some of us are here because we do this and we want to make sure that we're doing it right. And of course, there's that possibility too that we're aware that we're doing this and we want to make sure that we feel okay about the fact that we're doing this, or our school is doing this. Yeah, I couldn't add no and then zero and clear so I'm not sure if I could submit that, but there's a number of people who have used a number of different providers, and that ranges, doesn't it, there between 1 and 4, and 22% of respondents, albeit a very small sample. There's a significant number who have been engaging with them. So I think, folks, we could probably spend a lot of time. I think that we can open floodgates on evenings like this, and I love it. I think that's a fabulous thing to do. Maybe that's the one thing, about Zooms, and thanks to COVID, we found ourselves in a position to bring out little gems like this and offer them nationwide, and from, the comfort of either your makeshift office or your lounge, or even the end of your own bed. So I'm really grateful, and on behalf of PENS, I'd like to thank Maureen for the knowledge she brought and ideas that she brought with her tonight to the floor, and started some really valuable conversations in the chat, and hopefully onwards from here, regarding this broader idea of ensuring quality physical education, and where the external provider fits with that, what the pros are, the cons, the things we need to be aware of, and the ways that we can celebrate, if we do use external providers, the strong link for the teacher as the knowledgeable person who has the ability to work with and alongside an external provider, but doesn't hand over their class to an external provider. Thank you to everyone very much for your attendance tonight. I wish you a fine evening and a nice finish to the end of the week. And yeah, kia kaha, and onwards from here. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Heather.